Boston Bruins trade reports have been heating up with JT Miller and the Boston Bruins, and recent reports have suggested that things may be a lot closer than what people think. We're going to be talking about this, as well as the recent trade last night that occurred is making the NHL trade rumors heat up. We're going to be talking about all of that here in this video. Before we do, though, we're on the road to 6K, and we notice right now that 70% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. Like I said, we're on the road to 6K, the ultimate goal of passing the Boston Bruins. It's a very tough challenge, but I know that you guys can do it. Your support's been incredible, and I just appreciate everybody watching this video right now. But without any further ado, let's get into our first topic here. Our first quote from Frank Cervalli on the topic, and he said, "I haven't heard a lot of people talking about the Boston Bruins in the JT Miller sweepstakes, and their need for a top-end center has been well documented," Cervalli said. "We've also heard Cam Neely, their president of hockey operations, hinted the idea that, hey, we might have a rejig some things here based on the way that this season has played out." Now, looking at the season that we've played out so far, and the quotes from Cam Neely and what Frank Cervalli had to say here, that's spot on. Looking at the way that we need to see this season really come together towards the trade deadline, a rejig or a retool or whatever you want to call it is most certainly in the cards for this team. And looking at it right now, there's a lot of fans that really don't know where this team stands, including me. We've been seeing Don Sweeney, we've been seeing Cam Neely really come out here and say, hey, we're not going for a rebuild. A retool may be the option, but we need to see as we get closer to the trade deadline. But as we've been seeing in past seasons, especially in the NHL, when we were looking at all of these kinds of trades, these big trades and stuff leading up to the actual trade deadline itself, these trades happen, at least a week before. We've been seeing some as early as 2 to 3 weeks before, and that way on the trade deadline day, there's really nothing to be done at a major impact. And it is in the best interest of the Boston Bruins to kind of lock this in now. See what needs to be done before you get further and further into it. But is JT Miller the right option? That's something we're going to talk about here in a bit. But I do have another quote here from Frank Cervalli. He says, "I do believe the Boston Bruins have kept a very close tabs on JT Miller in this situation with the Vancouver Canucks," Cervalli said. "I would term them as a team lurking in the weeds right now to try and monitor those prices. Wouldn't be surprised if this continues to linger on closer to the March 7th deadline. Even as much as Vancouver seems motivated and Miller seems ready to go, they're a team that could remain in the mix." Now, we went out and got our fair share of Vancouver Canucks in free agency. Have they worked out? Not in the slightest. We've seen Elias Lindholm move down that third center, making $7.75 million on the third line. A ridiculous contract to have in that situation. Nikita Zadorov has been worth his contract a few games, but really hasn't lived up to it this far. But I feel much more comfortable, and this may be a very interesting thing to compare to what a lot of you guys think. I feel much more comfortable with Nikita Zadorov than Elias Lindholm. Earlier on in the season, we've seen links to Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov heading back in a trade to the Vancouver Canucks, which is something that a lot of people are talking about is, do we trade those guys that we just got? Do we trade Zadorov? Do we trade Lindholm? That is still yet to be the question, but the Bruins seem to be looking to add that number one center, but at what cost would it come? Just say we look at JT Miller here, making $8 million. We'll be 37 by the time this contract expires. That would be a detrimental contract to add without subtracting a lot. And they wouldn't even be able to add a JT Miller without subtracting a lot, so we have to take that with a grain of salt as well. But having a few players at the top of this roster and then having JT Miller join this with $8 million on its contract with 5 years left, in year 2 of 7, so realistically 5.5 years left, will be 37 when it expires. 31 years old right now. This is a very tough contract to be able to confidently take on, especially as it progresses down the future. Now, we know the cap will go up as well, so when we're looking at this contract right now, an $8 million cap hit would not be as bad as it would be a couple years down the road. A couple years down the road, it may look more towards a $5 to $6, maybe even $4 million contract once the cap rises as a whole. But it still is a very tough one to justify right now if you're looking to add multiple pieces, which it does seem like the Boston Bruins are. And as we've been able to see, kind of looking surrounding the Boston Bruins, JT Miller this season, 33 points in 37 games, is something the Boston Bruins have been really looking to add, is that point production, whether or not it's goals, whether or not it's, just contributing to anything on the ice. That's what the Bruins have needed. Realistically, the only one that we've been able to see confidently keep up this pace so far has been David Pastrnak, who, as of late, has really been on fire, and that's where most of his points have been coming from, 2 to 3 point games. But JT Miller, the way that we've been able to see his career kind of progress as he ages into 32 years old, not too long, in about a month or so, we do see him potentially be out in Vancouver, as you mentioned earlier with Frank Cervalli, if it depends on what the Canucks want to do, depends on JT Miller. JT Miller seems to want out, and the Vancouver are just trying to keep him, is what it seems like. And as we kind of progress towards the trade deadline as well, it does seem like the Canucks could run out of leverage. And with this case, that would make a trade easier for really anybody else, the Boston Bruins or whatnot, but the contract would stay the same, and it's a very tough contract to ask to retain salary on him. For what the Boston Bruins have and what the Boston Bruins are really looking at, it certainly will be a difficult one to kind of justify making a big move to get rid of that contract. But another tweet here, Carolina wasn't willing to trade Martin Necas for JT Miller, and now they've got Mikko Rantanen instead. They're pushing your chips into one of those guys. If Rantanen, without a doubt, Aho is going to look a lot of fun. But the main part of this tweet here is the beginning of it. Carolina was not willing to trade Martin Necas for JT Miller. Martin Necas, very good player. No doubt about that. Still very young, still very talented, good centerman. The Bruins were linked to him as well in the offseason, the guy that I certainly would have loved to have. And when you're looking at that, you kind of get your replacements in Elias Lindholm for Martin Necas. But as JT Miller, the Canucks were willing to trade JT Miller for Martin Necas. A certainly smart trade to make on their part, but Carolina was not willing to do it, which gives us a kind of a good idea as to what the market would look like for JT Miller, what his salary kind of translates into a trade value, and how everything comes out. So you're looking at a young guy like Martin Necas, a young centerman, big centerman with a lot of potential, heading to the Canucks. The Carolina Hurricanes were not willing to do that, which gives us kind of a pretty good sense of to what they would be looking for if this were the Boston Bruins. Now, we don't have too many young centermen that really show all this potential, that really have the ability to come into a game, take over this game. But when we look at a few pieces right now that are worth getting right now, the Canucks will certainly be looking to add to this kind of system that they're looking for, make it in the playoffs, get a push into the playoffs, and that's where you come into guys like Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo. Morgan Geeky's still an option who, although been playing very good as of late, still have without a contract next season. Trent Frederic is another option. There's so many names like this that could kind of get pushed into here to even out not just the value, but the cap as well, and also kind of swing this leverage into having the Boston Bruins in the favored position. And as we look into the forwards here, there's certainly a missing hole in the middle for centers. We know Elias Lindholm signed to be that number one center, 7 years, $7.75 million, and that number gives me cold shivers every time I say it aloud. But when we're looking at it and the way we're kind of looking at this whole system of centers, Matt Poitras right now is the only one that we have for the future, and the only one that really seems to have a spot there. Will JT Miller help the future? Absolutely not, but he certainly would help the present at this very moment. So it is yet to be determined if the Bruins seem to be also pushing for something. As Frank Cervalli said there, it certainly seems like they're a team in the bushes. They're definitely tracking all of this, but are they going to make a push for JT Miller is the question we have to ask ourselves. Is the question that will still be, the storyline of the trade deadline, I guess, right now for the Boston Bruins in terms of adding players, but there still is a lot to sell, and if they could sell and get something to help them now in JT Miller, still have 5 years on his contract after this season, 31 years old, and someone who's looking for this new spot and being able to team up with a few players that could certainly boost his point pace more than it already is something that the Bruins need to at least consider. And of course, the Vancouver Canucks are looking to do this. But one thing I want to pull up before we finish this video off here is the contracts for the forward side of things right now. Remember looking at it, Coyle, Zacha, Lindholm, Pastrnak, Poitras, and Kastelic are the only ones in the NHL at this very moment that are in contract for next season. Max Jones is there, but he will not be factored into the NHL next season. The Bruins have a lot of free agents, and they're going to need to add to this forward group, and if they want to trade many of these pending free agents, certainly now is the time to do so as we head closer to the trade deadline. So let me know what you think. Do you think that we're going to see a trade for JT Miller? I made a video about this a little while ago. The reaction kind of then was negative towards a trade, but I do think that we're starting to kind of swing into somewhere now where the Bruins have a bit of potential. They have that bit of, momentum coming into it, and I think this game against the Colorado Avalanche will be a good tell of where the Bruins stand in that type of aspect. So when we're looking at it, it's certainly something to think about, and certainly something that will be interesting for a lot of Bruins fans. So that's all I got for this video. Like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it's a possibility? Do you want it to happen? When do we see it, if so? But that's all I got. Like I said, let me know. That's all I got for this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. But I'm signing out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.